Okay, seniors, welcome back. We're going to look at the poem The Wanderer today. We're going to read it. I'm going to read the whole thing at some point and stop and discuss it. So if you're doing this from home, I'd like you to follow along in your book. You're going to be on page 27, okay? And again, The Wanderer is very similar to The Seafarer. We're going to have a lot of the same concepts. The imagery and mood are very similar. We're still going to be looking for usages of kennings and caesuras. And we're also, one of the big things is this is another elegy. So we're going to look at what is this poem mourning the loss of. It is not going to be totally the same as The Seafarer, so don't just automatically make an assumption, okay? Now, right away, I want to teach you something that I think that all of you need to learn. Be careful going to the internet to find information about anything, okay? Go ahead and use it as a resource, but don't use it as the gospel, okay? Because when I did some research on The Seafarer, they mentioned the poem The Wanderer, and they made a comment that it was spoken by a single person. And I want to point out right away that is not the case. That is very wrong, in fact. So if all of the information you have about the Wanderer is from something you read on the internet, and you didn't bother looking at the text and actually thinking about it, you got a problem right away. So let's see how I know that as we start off. So again, in your books, page 27, he goes, "Oft to the wanderer, weary of exile, cometh God's pity, compassionate love, though woefully toiling on wintry seas with churning oar in the icy wave. Homeless and helpless, he fled from fate. Thus saith the wanderer, mindful of misery, grievous disasters, and death of kin." Now, that first part is indicating there's a speaker who's saying this is what the wanderer said. So I feel like there's two people here. There's a guy who kind of gives an intro and says, "This is this poor wanderer. Here's what he went through. Here's what he personally has to say." It also shows up at the end, okay? If you go to page 29 and look at line 103, he says, "Thus spake the sage." So we do know that there's two people here. Now, is that a technicality? Sure, but it doesn't matter. You can be wrong on that too, and we don't want you to make mistakes, because let me tell you, if you were writing a paper and you mentioned the one speaker only, then readers who know the poem are going to immediately discount everything you have to say because you were incorrect about that one thing. It shows careless reading, and that's what you never want that, okay? So, looking back at this, that first part is setting us up for, you notice the imagery is the same as The Seafarer. You got this lonely, miserable person who's about to talk about what his life is like. These pages, if you'll notice, has that huge gap in the middle of the lines. That's your caesura, which would be used again to help with memorization, the pausing to get the meter right, and again, the same language, but definitely a different version of it. I showed you guys pictures of what The Seafarer looked like originally when it was written, and it was a different language, to be honest with you. I mean, Old English, but I believe it was old or Middle English. Either one, definitely very difficult to follow. So this sets up. Now, from here on until the last little bit, we're going to have the Wanderer speaking purely, okay? So let's see what we can find out about him. It says, "Oft when the day broke, oft at the dawning, lonely and wretched, I wailed my woe. No man is living, no comrade left, to whom I dare fully unlock my heart. I have learned truly the mark of a man is keeping his counsel and locking his lips. Let him think what he will, for woe of heart withstandeth not fate, a failing spirit earneth no help. Men eager for honor bury their sorrow deep in their breast." So right away, what's this guy saying about his life? Well, we get a hint about maybe what he's elegizing. He talks about having no kinsman and no one he can trust, no one he can talk to. He says no one he can unlock his heart to. And he talks a lot about the importance of keeping it to yourself and not sharing with others. Now, again, we've talked about what makes this worth studying today is not so I can show you what a kenning is, because honestly, who cares, right? But it's about the relevance and how people of ancient times and people today share so many similarities. And think about right there the idea that, it's important sometimes to keep your own counsel. And he's sad he has no one he can trust, but he also realizes that when you just go and talk about stuff with people, a lot of the times that makes it out into the public and where you don't want it. So, again, I think that you guys, teenagers today, know that better than anyone, the importance of being careful with who you share counsel. So, good start. Definitely got some relevance to it. So have I also often in wretchedness fettered my feelings far from my kin, homeless and hapless since days of old, when the dark earth covered my dear Lord's face, and I sailed away with sorrowful heart over wintry seas, seeking a gold lord If far or near, live one to befriend me with a gift in the mead hall and comfort for the grief. So there's our first kenning. When you get Gold Lord, that's just another king. Again, kennings are really good for adding syllables and making the rhythm fit. You know, rappers today do it by making up words, and they have for years. So it works really well with rhythm. This is just giving us another hint about maybe what he's elegizing. Apparently his king has died, and I explained to you guys in class when we did the Seafair that this culture, a lot of, at least when this was originally came out, a lot of this was based on you'd have your little group, clan, or whatever that you were a part of, and you had one king who basically doled out resources to other people. You know, the king owned everything. And so, you know, the best warriors got the best stuff. And so when he dies, it doesn't always necessarily mean it just goes to his son. That's not a thing at this point. So, you know, if your clan's weaker, a nearby one's going to come through and, you know, take over basically. And now you've got nothing. If you were a great warrior, you could easily just sell your services to the next guy down the line. But if not, and you go and you're an average to subpar warrior, and you go try to join a new group, you're going to be further down the totem pole and maybe not get enough to even survive. So this guy misses. He had a good lord that he loved and cared about, and now he doesn't have one. And you get that feeling of exile, which is big in these poems. Okay. He says, who bears it knows what a bitter companion, shoulder to shoulder, sorrow can be. When friends are no more, his fortune is exiled. No gifts of fine gold, a heart that is frozen. Earth's winsomeness dead, and he dreams of the hall men, the dealing of treasure, the days of his youth, when his lord bade welcome to wassail and feast. But gone is that gladness, and never again shall come the loved counsel of comrade and king. Okay, no doubt he's elegizing the loss of his lord and kinsman. Now, the previous one, the Seafarer, was more about a loss of a way of life, and you can see that kind of here, but he's being more specific. Notice also, we don't have a lot of the cold imagery that we had in the first one. This one seems to be focusing more on the loneliness and exile part. We got another kenning, and this poem, the translation we have here, is really good about putting a dash in between the two to kind of signify it's a kenning, but I don't think you need that, and they don't always do that, just for the record. But hall men would just be his kinsmen, the people he lived with, all right? He says, even in slumber his sorrow assaileth, and dreaming he claspeth his dear lord again, head on knee, hand on knee, loyally laying, pledging his liege as in days long past. Then from his slumber he starts lonely-hearted, beholding grey stretches of tossing sea, seabirds bathing, with wings outspread, while hailstorms darken, and driving snow, bitterer than is the bane of his wretchedness, the longing for a loved one, his grief renewed, the form of his kinsman taketh shape in silence, in rapture he greets them, in gladness he scans old comrades remembered, but they melt into air with no word of greeting to gladden his heart. Then again surges his sorrow upon him, and grimly he spurs his weary soul once more to the toil of the tossing sea. So now we definitely get a seafarer feel, don't we? You get this idea that he's out on the sea, he's cold, he's miserable, and he's hallucinating, seeing his kinsman that he misses. And so kind of an important detail there, and how it shows the similarity in poetry. Remember, early on we talked about the power of language to capture a place, a location. Remember, our whole year we're talking about the power of language to do blank, and this is one of them. It can capture the feel of a country. I mean, I can feel what it would have been like to be on a boat. If I read The Seafarer and The Wanderer, a boat in this time period, freezing my tail off, and yet still having that loneliness too. So just a miserable existence in so many ways. All right. Now, one thing that's noticeably missing from The Wanderer at this point is our religious elements that we saw in The Seafarer that were added in as it was composed. So we need to keep an eye out for those, see if they show up. All right. But again, this paragraph, or this stanza we just read, is very much so in line with The Seafarer. A lot of similarities. Okay. All right. He says, no wonder, therefore, in all the world, if a shadow darkens upon my spirit, when I reflect on the fates of men, how one by one proud warriors vanish from the halls that knew them, and day by day all this earth ages and droops unto death. No man may know wisdom till many a winter has been his portion. A wise man is patient, not swift to anger, nor hasty of speech, neither too weak nor too reckless in war, neither fearful nor fain, nor too wishful of wealth, nor too eager in vow ere he know the event. A brave man must bide when he speaketh his boast until he knows surely the goal of his spirit. So again, some pretty heavy seafarer references there. We get the idea about the world isn't what it used to be. Now, I don't think that's your main mourning here. I don't think that's the elegy. I still think the elegy is about his kinsmen and lords particularly, but still you see an element of it here too, where he's talking about things aren't the way they used to be. And then he goes into a really cool passage about what a wise person entails. And one of our questions for today, and I think it may have even been one of our essential questions, was what does wisdom look like? And they have very specific views of it. Things like, first of all, age. To this group of people, age, the Anglo-Saxons, age was a big deal. We still see that today. Can you be wise at the ripe old age of 18? Sure you can, but usually you think about older people because age is experience adds to wisdom, right? But he talks about things like patience, doesn't talk too much, not too weak, but yet not stupid. There's a lot of things that go into traits that these people would really want you to have. By the way, CP class, you want to mark that for the project you're working on because you're definitely going to want to see traits that they valued at that time period, and we're going to compare them to traits that we value today. Because I'll tell you right now, while a lot of those are still valued, I don't feel age is. We treat age like something that's a curse. We treat it like old people don't know what they're talking about. We treat it like they're out of touch. And our culture lionizes youth and how great it is. But age is something to fear, and you respect people less. I can remember being a teacher at the age of 28, how kids treated me then versus now at 42, how most of you guys are treating me, and they're very different responses. And I'm not saying one's good and bad. I'm just saying that there's a big difference in, oh, that's the cool teacher, the fun teacher at 28, and at 42, oh yeah, that's a nice guy, he knows his stuff, but you lose a lot of that, no matter if you're the same person. Guys, I'd be honest with you. Me at 42, no difference than me at 28, except I got to wear glasses now, and I've got a few extra pounds. Beyond that, I act the exact same way, but kids treat me very differently because of age. So we do see some differences and similarities, right? Okay, going on, it says, a wise man will ponder how dread is that doom when all this world's wealth shall be scattered and waste as now over all through the regions of the earth. Walls stand rime-covered and swept by the winds. The battlements crumble, the wine halls decay. Joyless and silent, the heroes are sleeping where the proud host fell by the wall they defended. Some battle launched on their long last journey, or one a bird bore o'er the billowing sea. One the grey wolf slew, one a grieving earl sadly gave to the grave's embrace. The warden of men hath wasted this world till the sound of music and revel is stilled, and these giant-built structures stand empty of life. Man, that's a depressing passage, okay? But what he's talking about here is that all the great things he remembered are slowly fading, okay? Again, and I could take an argument that he's eulogizing the loss of the way the world used to be. I really can. I still feel like it's about specifically, his family and stuff. But there's definitely more passages about how the world is different. So, very similar to the seafarer, this idea that we're viewing in poetic form the changing of the world for these people. And we talked about this when we talked about history. That's why we did it. Before you might have had these roving bands of warriors, and then all of a sudden people became more sedentary. You start introducing agriculture. People start learning how to grow more crops. Cities start to spring up, and with that comes a softening of people. Look at us today. In a big city right now, if the coronavirus had gotten worse back in March or April and the grocery stores started to run low, some of you would have been fine. Your families know how to grow crops. You can hunt, things like that. A lot of us, me included, are really bad at those things, and we would have not known what to do without a grocery store. So we definitely see, as you become more, and I'm going to put this in quotation marks, civilized, there's a softening of the person, and he's definitely doesn't like that, nor did our speaker in the Seafarer. He's got all these images of crumbling buildings and just a crumbling society, to be honest with you. All right. Okay, continuing on. He who shall muse on these moldering ruins and deeply ponder this darkling life must brood on old legends of battle and bloodshed, and heavy the mood that troubles his heart. Where now is the warrior? Where is the war horse? Bestowal of treasure and sharing of feast. Alas, the bright ale cup, the byrnie-clad warrior, the prince in his splendor, those days are long sped in the night of the past as if they never had been, and now remains only for warriors' memorials a wall wondrous high with serpent shapes carved. Storms of ash spears have smitten the earls, carnage of weapon and conquering fate. So he says now all that's left are memorials, and he feels like that's not a fitting way to remember these people. He says you've got memories, and even those of you who don't have that, you've got statues and walls, and that's your memory. And he doesn't feel like that's really a good way to remember people. He feels like a good way to remember them is to carry on the traditions. We talked at the beginning about tradition and how poetry reflects that or helps shape it. And it really, or I'm sorry, not poetry, literature. But, you see that here, that this guy wants to carry out the old ways. And, guys, honestly, this poem would have been a great way to teach that, the value of tradition to younger people, because it does fade out and people get focused on other things. This is a great part to bring up when you discuss things like the issues with monuments and statues in our world today. Because again, there's a reference here to that they don't have the value we think they do, according to him. He feels like these aren't the greatest way to remember people. It's through honoring them by your actions, not by putting up a statue that no one pays attention to 98% of the time. I mean, it's a nice honor, but a bigger honor is to pass down teachings and to pass down what people stood for, as opposed to just, hey, who is this guy that there's a statue of out here? Oh, that's cool, but move on with your life. That's really not what it is. We still haven't seen the religious element, have we? So let's see if it shows up here at the end. He says, storms now batter these ramparts of stone, blowing snow and the blast of winter enfold the earth. Night shadows fall, darkly lowering from north, driving raging hail in wrath upon men. Wretchedness fills the realm of earth, and fate's decrees transform the world. Here wealth is fleeting, friends are fleeting, man is fleeting, maid is fleeting, and the foundation of earth shall fall. Wow. I mean, there you go. Darkest passage in this whole section. He's basically telling you that the world is useless and everything's... When he says fleeting, fleeting means it's fading. Because all of this, you can't be trusted. It's going to fade. There's nothing left. So, again, no religious thing. And by the way, there's only one reference to anything religious. It's the last line. So we don't get that vibe like we did in the Seafarer, like the monk was trying to combat this fatalism that you saw in these people, which is definitely here. He's basically saying that fate controls everything and everything's collapsing, and there's just no sense of hope, to be honest with you. And then we get the final stanza, which says, thus spake the sage in solitude pondering, good man is he who guardeth his faith. He must never too quickly unburden his breast of its sorrow, but eagerly strive for redress. And happy the man who seeketh for mercy from his heavenly Father, our fortress and strength. So, I'm going to go back to the very first statement I made about not trusting the internet. I would assume that the person who wrote that, because it was a scholarly section, probably had a version of this that subtracted the first and second stanzas, because you can easily see how those might be added in. And that's a really clever thing by whoever wrote this down, if that's what happened, because they didn't make it forced like the Seafarer. They made it feel like this is a frame story. And like once upon a time, this great person, this wanderer, spoke. Here's what he said, and then at the end they throw in their religious element, which is basically that you should guard your faith, and not let these types of things wear you down. And instead of just sitting around moping, get out. And when he says redress, get out there and find a way to fix things. And then finally he talks about seeking mercy from God. So you do get that. And again, this would have been a great way to show these people, hey, look, your ways of thinking, your views, we can easily take them and combine them with Christianity, and they work. And that was kind of what the goal of a lot of these missionaries were when you saw text like this. So I like this better than the Seafarer, just because I feel like it's a purer poem. I feel like it's not interrupted. I feel like the guy who wrote this one down and then added to it did a really good job. So if we look at, and let me pull it up real quick. You won't be able to see it, so give me 2 seconds. I want to pull up the weekly agenda that talks about this to make sure I hit all of the main points. All right, so goodness, it's hard to find things when I need them right away. All right, weekly agenda, week 5. Here we go. All right, we talked about the 2 different speakers. That's the first one, with identifying speakers in a poem. We identified kennings and caesuras and what they're for. We did that. We talked about tonal shifts. We didn't actually, but you see them at times where, actually in this poem, I got to be honest with you, tone shifts, I was using these to compare. You see a lot of tonal shifts in the Seafarer. The Wanderer doesn't have any, while the Wanderer is actually speaking. He very much so sticks with areas that are, it's depressing. There's nothing good about the world. Pretty dark stuff the whole time. He's very, very depressing. The The frame speaker, on the other hand, does offer us a little bit of hope at the end. So there is a tonal shift there. We talked about imagery. Imagery impacts this by, again, the cold. We do see a little bit of cold imagery. It's not as prevalent as it was in the Seafarer, but it's still there. And also just the imagery of exile, the loneliness, the idea that things aren't the same. That's a big deal. Okay, I didn't talk about this one. It talks about identifying theme. The theme of this poem is the importance of keeping memory living, and not through just things like statues. At least in my opinion, I feel like that's what everything's building to. He misses the way things were. Those traditions and things are fading, and when the people are gone, all that remains are those memories and those traditions. And if all we're going to do is build a statue or dedicate a wall to someone, they fade away. So there's this importance of keeping things going. For the record, I read these to you, and I know that it's easier when I read it, but it's really not hard to take the time and just slow down and read it past. All I did, I stopped at the end of each stanza. But you can stop sooner and make sure and just paraphrase. Okay, this is what is happening here. This is what's happening here. If you're on your own, that's the way to do it. Okay. There are a couple more questions on the weekly agenda, but those I want to let you have because we're at 21 minutes and I want to stop. But things like, is sorrow valuable, and things like that. And the ending of this kind of says it is. So I want you to think about those things on your own. Whether you're in class, we probably talked about it in class, but at home, that's for you to think about. And when you see the test, just know that that's probably going to be an element of one of the questions. All right. Okay, guys. Well, let me stop. I've gone on way too long. I'm going to stop this one. Then I'm going to go ahead and record the Wife's Lament, which will be much shorter. And then we'll have our, let's see, this is going to be our Tuesday work, done in video, that if you want to look at it, it's going to be available. Okay. All right. So thank you guys for staying with me. And thank you for watching this. Those of you that did, I'm not trying to be a YouTube guy. I'm obviously not cut out for that, but I do appreciate you taking that much interest in your understanding of this. Okay. And those of you watching this from home, I miss you guys, and I hope to see you soon.